Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Terry Minor Spencer here, Executive Director with West Empower. We have a great educational community civic series today. We have a couple guests. I am going to let them each introduce themselves. But first, we're going to introduce who we are in collaboration with, and that is Reverend Freeman. So, Reverend Freeman of Pennsylvania Interfaith Impact Network.
Well,
Hello,
thank you so
Reverend.
much. Hi,
Thank
Terry. It's so great to be with you, and as always, it's great working with you. And the work that we do is extraordinarily important in the community and in the Commonwealth. We just had a wonderful action, as you well know, related to the Allegheny County Jail, and I don't want to use that I want to use that as a segue to the work that we're
Mhm.
doing at the Pennsylvania Interfaith Impact Network. Many times we talk about the idea of criminal justice reform. In my personal speak and my public speak, I'm using that word a little differently. I'm calling it reform citizen justice,
Mm.
because what we have right now is wrong. What I've heard at the county is so wrong. I have members of my congregation who are in our federal system, who are in our state system, and it's wrong. And so I don't want to reform what we have. I really want to take it down and do something different,
Mhm.
because the whole notion when we start with the premise of criminality is flawed from the floor up. When you look at the 13th Amendment, it gives us a segue right there to make them slaves and the
Mhm.
re-enslavement of people. Regardless of how we look at it, they are citizens of our nation, and we need to treat them with dignity and respect. I think Brian Stevenson said it so well. None of us are as bad as the worst thing we've ever done. And as such, we've got to do the work of treating
Yeah.
citizens with respect. And so that's the work that we're doing at the Pennsylvania Interfaith Impact Network. Summer and I go back a ways a little bit in our work in the Woodland Hills School District. I can't believe how long that's been. Jeez. But we were able to literally transform our school board in the Woodland Hills School District a few years back now. But that's
Mhm.
the work. We got to stay in the work and continue to stay in the work because people are the core of our nation.
Yeah.
Um, the Pennsylvania Interfaith Impact Network, we're about believing what the Constitution said, but never really actualized. We, the people.
Mm.
Um, and when they
Yeah.
wrote that, they didn't mean us. They didn't mean women. They meant rich, land-holding people, predominantly white men.
Mhm.
And we are at a place now where that is becoming the modus operandi in our country. And I'm so
Mhm.
grateful that Summer is, I'm going to speak prophetically, is going to be in the Congress and we're going to win this thing. And we're going to have a different voice in our congressional delegation from the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. And we have to,
Mhm.
because frankly, we can't be left out. Someone said it
Yeah.
well, if you're not at the table, you're on the table. And
Yeah.
Summer, I'm so grateful that you're listening to the calling, and I'm going to speak spiritually. You're listening to the calling of God on your life to move on and do what God has called you to do. So go get them and wrap it up real good and tell them what they need to hear, not what they want to hear. Tell them what they need to hear. And that's our journey at the Pennsylvania Interfaith Impact Network. We're doing a really good job in collaboration with Terry in our colorful uh, backgrounds program. If you haven't heard about it, get on our website, learn a lot about what we're doing for our returning citizens. We've incorporated the word. We don't use returning criminals, we talk returning citizens. They are citizens, and we need to treat them with dignity and respect. Another word I use in my public speak is anywhere else we have a constitutional prohibition against double jeopardy, but we don't have a constitutional prohibition against perpetual jeopardy. When
Mm.
someone gets a criminal record in this country, they are in perpetual jeopardy. They can't get resources. They are denied jobs. They can't get health care. The whole menagerie of things that keep them from functioning in our society are built right in. That's perpetual jeopardy. And, well, let's tear it down. So, I'm looking forward to the work that when Summer gets to Congress, I'm speaking prophetically. When you get to Congress, lead the charge to tear this booger down and lead a different way for our citizens to be treated. And I'm looking forward to all that you're going to do when you get to Congress. So Terri, you're doing some of that work at the local level. While you do it at the local, you do it at the federal level. I think we're going to make a better world just a little bit every day. So I'm grateful to be on this call with you, and I'm going to step out and I'm going to listen to you and hear more about what you're going to do when you get to Washington D.C.
Well, thank you so much. Thank you so much, Reverend Freeman. And again, Western Power is, we're making some big moves, and we are grateful that we are in collaboration. Summer, did you want to say anything to Reverend Freeman before he jumps off?
Oh my goodness. It had been, Terri, I did not know that Reverend Freeman was going to be here. It had been so long since I've seen him in person. But when I talk about just how powerful it is when we connect, when we're connected in our communities and we're getting in sync and we are working and approaching it from all of our ministries, all of our different wheelhouses. I'm telling you that we are seeing and building a movement, right? That isn't just going to be for a moment. And don't get me wrong, there's going to be kinks in the road. But I truly believe that what we're seeing here in Western PA is a sustainable movement that is going to be, seismic. It's going to be like paradigm shifting. And it's going to be precisely because of the people who we're centering, the people who we are building for and around and with. And this was a great centering for me as a reminder of where I came, why I came, and why we're doing this every single day, right? To go right back to those roots at Woodland Hills. So I appreciate that. And I appreciate just the work that Reverend does in and out, whether it be the community, because he's from my side of town. Terri, we love the West, but we have Braddock representing here today. So the work that he does there, the work that he does in ministry, the work that he does in activism and movement work. So I'm just so appreciative of the groundwork that you two have been laying down.
Yes, thank you.
We'll stay in it, and we'll stay in it together. And it just to encourage you from our sacred word, it says the race is not given to the swift nor to the strong, but to those who endure to the end. So continue to endure, my friend, in the journey. Blessings to you.
Thank you so much. Thank you. And ladies and gentlemen, please, if you are not familiar with PIIN, please go to their website. That is PIINPA.org. So now we come to our special guest, Rep. Summer Lee. And I'm not going to say a whole lot about her. I want her to tell you, I'm sure, the men and women that is watching, who she is, and what's going on with her right now.
Oh my goodness. First of all, Terri, it's always great to be with you. I don't know if the folks here remember, but I was here in my capacity running for the state rep. I'm a state rep right now. On the other side of town here in the Mon Valley area, some of the eastern suburbs, most of those communities that make up the Woodland Hills School District. And I've been here since 2018 when I ran for the first time. And I see myself and truly, when I think about the titles that I lead with or who I am, I'm a Black woman who comes from this community, who's raised in community, organizing, activism. And I enter politics really out of a necessity, right? It wasn't something that I had seen myself doing. Honestly, it wasn't something that I could envision for me, because the reality is that we had not seen it. This had not been a place. There had not been really true pathways for folks who are coming in from marginalized backgrounds, from impacted communities to get into office. So I've been proud for the last 4 years to really reconceptualize, right, how we do politics, who we're doing politics with and for whom, and making sure that we are not gatekeeping, but tearing down gates as we approach them and as we get there. So if I am lucky, I've been running for Congress for congressional district, the 12th congressional district, which is going to be the entire city of Pittsburgh, is going to be from the east to the west. We will have some of the South Hills, some of the most of the Mon Valley, that's Allegheny County, and we'll even be moving into Westmoreland County. So we're going to we have new districts because it's a redistricting year. But I've been running. So it's a slightly different district. We have new folks that are going to be in it. But this is going to be it's going to be it's going to be the seat that's majority city of Pittsburgh. But you'll see, and I've noticed that we have the charge here in Western Pennsylvania to really represent a diverse group of people in ways that we don't often see in a lot of congressional or state house districts. So I've been proud to build movement. I'm also the co-founder of Unite, which I am, of course, on with folks who I recognize here on this call. And that's been an organization that has done progressive electoral work, helping to get particularly progressive women in office, Black folks, and hopefully we'll be expanding and keeping strong as we're going into new races and helping to really organize our communities and introduce them to the electoral world and introduce them to their place in that electoral world and helping our communities take up space in electoralism. So hopefully I have an election in November. If I am so honored, I would be the representative for this district, and that's what we're working towards now.
Wow. So you know what, and thank you for that. But what I heard was you have done a lot of firsts. You have put your hand into a lot and created a movement. Tell us what pressure is that? Any pressure on you going to Congress, or is that just something that you don't feel any pressure as being a Black woman in the first?
No, I think honestly, honest to goodness, if you are in this work from whatever vantage point you're in this work, if you're in this work, there is a pressure, right? We're dealing with people. Livelihoods, we're dealing with people's safety, we're dealing with people's communities, we're dealing with basic needs, right? Whether it be putting food on folks' tables, ensuring that folks have access to jobs, to clean air and clean water, to good schools, right? We're doing everything, making sure that communities get the resources that they need. So we're dealing with life and death situations. So if you're not feeling pressure, then you're not in the right line of work. But for me, when I think about, I'm so happy you asked that, because just being reflective, when I think about the very specific pressure that I feel, I recognize that as somebody who's going to be I'm 34 years old, right? And I'm going to a congressional seat that had been held by the same gentleman for 26 years, right? So there's going to be a learning curve. And I recognize that there's always going to a need for grades to give it and to receive it. When I think about the true pressure that I feel is making sure that whatever I do, whatever my legacy is, that it be inclusive of the second, right? The third, the fourth, that I don't be the first or the only, right? How am I using the platform, using the position to, I would say, till that soil, right? So that, our next harvest, our next crop, doesn't have to necessarily go through what we've gone through, and that we're passing off batons, right? So that when they get here, when the next Black woman gets here, when the next poor working class folk get here, right? That when they're there, right, they're ready to hit the ground running, avoiding traps or pitfalls that I've had. So, right, so that we're leaving it better than when we found it. So that's the biggest pressure that I feel, right? And just the pressure of representing, folks in a movement that it's a growing movement, right? We're really dipping our toes in, and in many ways we've jumped in the deep end, but making sure that we're delivering where we can, making sure that we're being responsive. There are going to be so many hard things that come up, but making sure that I'm always being true to us, to this movement, being true to the people, is a pressure that I feel, and something that I don't think is ever going to go away.
Yeah. But you know what I'm thankful for, what I'm hearing from you is that that there's going to be bumps, hills, but I'm going to say what my pastor always says is we all going to go through a valley. It's about not staying in that valley. So, and it, you recognize it. So you're ahead, you're one step ahead. So thank you for that. My next question, and I was going to ask, why Congress, but I think you answered it when you told us, it was something that you knew you had to jump in for us, for the community, for the betterment of the Mon Valley. And so I'm not even going to ask you that, because I think you answered that extremely well already. So my next question would be that, how do you see yourself crossing the aisle? How do you see yourself talking to the other side and getting things done?
I think it's so funny. I mean, it's a question that we get a lot, right? It's almost
Mm,
always the first question that we go to, and
mhm.
I'm truly hopeful of the day where we're just really thinking differently about
Yeah.
that aisle and differently about teams and who is on which and what team. Because the
Hmm.
reality is that there's work that we have to do on both sides of the aisle. I always say that you have to take care of home first, and that
Hmm.
makes a lot of people uncomfortable, right? That idea that we have to take care of home, that we have to make
Yeah.
sure that we're right within, right? How are we gonna win when you ain't right
Hmm.
within, right? And that's something that I focus on a lot, because the reality is that we can't even go over to the other. First of all, we shouldn't want to go over to the other aisle until we have our ducks in
Hmm.
line, right? How are we making sure that we are putting forth the strongest message and vision for the people of
Hmm.
this country, right? For the people of this district, this region, making sure that we're crafting that in concert with them, keeping their needs and centering the folks who need to be centered, but also
Hmm.
recognizing who we're dealing with on the other side. And I'm going to be
Yeah.
very frank here, recognizing who we're
Please.
dealing with on the other side.
Hmm.
Because I often ask, and people talk about, well, Summer, you're going to this place now. How are you going to play to the center, right? How are you going
Hmm.
to compromise and do all of those things? And what I ask is to make sure that you're very, very, very clear about where you're asking me and when you're asking me to compromise, right? Because I would love to know
Hmm.
what the difference, what the center is, what is the middle of democracy and fascism, right? What is the middle of equity and racism? And making sure that those are not the areas in which we're equivocating, right? Because there are some people,
Hmm.
especially at the congressional level, who are fascists. They are
Hmm.
insurrectionists. These are people who showed us exactly who they were. And it wasn't just on January 6th, right? They've been showing us
Hmm.
for a long time. But this is the time where we couldn't kind of bury our heads in the sand. So we know that there are
Right.
some people who are working not towards the good of the people, of all people in
Hmm.
our country. They are working towards their own very specific agenda, right? And if we are not going in the same direction, then there is no reaching across the aisle in those instances. But what I learned, and particularly from some of the experiences that I have, and there are so many where it shouldn't even be a question, right? We
Yeah.
know when it comes to working for working class people, there is no owl, right? We need to
Hmm.
be in lockstep, whether you are a D or R or an independent, right? When we're working towards, an economic justice and economic recovery, right? When we're working
Hmm.
towards making sure that, our schools are safe, right? That our students are getting the education that they deserve. There should be no owl, right? And I am
Hmm.
willing and excited to work with literally everybody who is working toward justice and equity, right? Who is working toward making sure that, our communities are strengthened, that our communities are represented well. And I don't think that there's a race behind that or a gender behind that or a political
Hmm.
party. Those are the times where, when you're going in the direction that I'm going on, I'll drive, I'll sit in the passenger seat, shotgun, I'll sit in the back, but I just want to be in the car.
I know that's right. I know. Thank you so much for that. Thank you, because yeah, that is so 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 true. And I think that anyone that knows you is not going to accept accept anything different than, like the Reverend Freeman said, you being you. Not saying what somebody wants to hear, but saying what needs to be said. So thank you so much for that. Go
And
ahead.
real quick, and just to say, and to really be honest about that, because that's the question that we get the most scrutiny over. Me, particularly, like someone like me, progressive Black women who kind of represent, this new age of kind of our political movement. And I want to say that I'm not working across the aisle with anybody who's working towards my destruction or my community's destruction.
Mm,
And I would hope that no
mm,
one would ask me to, right? That no
mhm,
one would ask me to. If someone is working to destroy my constituents, destroy me,
mhm,
destroy people who look like me, then none of us should be working with them. We should be creating a political environment that sends a clear message that our democracy, right, there is no place in the
mhm.
democracy for people who are trying to destroy it, right? If you're not trying to strengthen democracy, then there can't be a place. Can't go hand in hand.
Wow. Yeah, yeah. Thank you. Thank you so much for that, Summer. Let me ask you this, because I don't even know if Congress can do anything about my next question. And my next question is pertaining to teachers. Can
Mhm.
Congress, is there something that Congress can do pertaining to their to teacher salaries?
Mm. So the reality is so education is one of those real it's a real quirk about like
Hmm.
United States and about our Constitution in the United States, right? Because the reality is that education is not guaranteed or mandated in our federal constitution, right? That one, the big one that we think about. It's one of the rights that are maintained by the states. It's left to the states.
Mm-hmm.
But that doesn't mean that the federal government doesn't have a role to play. And
Mm-hmm.
the number one role is money, resources, right? The federal government can fund school districts. They can give states, the funding that they need or more funding, which could help alleviate, for
Mm-hmm.
instance, the property tax kind of crisis that we see, particularly in communities that are the least resourced, right? Those
Mm-hmm.
Black and brown, those poor school districts and communities, that helping. So the more federal funding we get, the less of the state, the less burden on the states, and then of course trickling down, less burden to the localities. And as more money comes in, those monies can be used, right? Whether it be for programs, whether it be for facilities, but particularly, of course, for teacher pay, right? So that's one thing that we can make sure that we are taking care of. For teachers, obviously making sure that we're not eroding teachers' access to Social Security or any of the benefits that they pay into, right? That we are not stripping them of those. That's something that we can take care of at the federal level. But also, this is something that we have to do in concert with the state level. So from coming from state government,
Yeah.
that's the area, and that's the big reason why I ran for state house in the first place, was like education. So it's a big state issue, but the federal government has this role too.
Okay, thank you. Because I ask myself, and I try to do some reading and just get a better understanding of the salaries of our teachers. And so, thank you so much for that. Couple more questions. Now, for the community that has been, and I'm going to be 1,000% honest. I did not know. I was very ignorant of the deaths and of the treatment of majority of the LGBTQ plus community. And what opened my eyes is one day I was riding through town coming home, and there was a line of people with pictures of people. And I got home and I was asking somebody like, what was the pictures? And they were all pictures of people that are deceased, of our trans family that is deceased. And no one's talking about it. And so I want to know what on the federal level can be done to not just say, hey, we all need to be protected, but put action into making sure that that they're getting the protection that we all need.
This is, and first of all, I do want to say, because when we say like no one's talking about it, the
Mhm.
people who have the power, the influence, are absolutely not talking about it enough, right? But I do want to elevate those folks who really are, right? When I think
Okay.
about our trans siblings, right? Particularly in my district, my state house district, in my congressional district, Ciora Thomas, for instance, who's with Sisters
Mhm.
Pittsburgh, Trans Uniting,
Mhm.
and so many other, you know, organizations and really movement that have stepped up to filling gaps
Yeah.
where our government's not filling them in. So when I think about the needs of our trans community, our queer community, particularly our most marginalized Black and Indigenous and Brown, trans and queer
Mhm.
folks, I think about so many different things that our government can do and should do. Right now, the trans community particularly is under attack. It's been
Mhm.
really in the crosshairs of this culture war that the Republican Party, that those extreme right wing white nationalists, insurrectionists really have been leaning on, right? So as we've been seeing the conversations going deeper and deeper into eroding when it comes to what they are calling CRT, right? Critical race theory, but truly has nothing at all to do with critical race theory. We saw them use that as a direct on ramp to attack trans kids, trans babies, right? Keeping them from being able to participate in extracurricular activities in their sports, really putting a target on trans children's heads, right? And it seems innocuous, and they're pretending when they say that, well, we care about women's sports. I'm somebody who played women's sports in high school,
Mhm.
right? And the way that we're targeting these children and excluding them is shameful, but it's not just shameful, it's harmful, right? We are putting them in harm's way, and we're seeing that those attacks come from federal governments and state governments, right? So this is happening at
Mhm.
both levels. So strengthening those protections so that they are no longer able to be targets, whether it be, targets, and right now fodder for Title IX, for instance, which is federal policy, at the state level and at the federal level, making sure that we're enshrining protections. In Pennsylvania, for instance, we don't have protections for queer and trans folks when it comes to housing or when it comes to jobs, right? So there are places where they can be fired, where they can be evicted because of their identity. And we have not been able to move on state level protection for that. So always at the federal level, we can be enshrining deeper protections for people, but also making sure that we're meeting basic needs. Medicare for all. This is something that's incredibly important to me. When we think about the medical needs of queer and trans folks, making sure that they have access to the care, to the affirming care that they need, from birth, from infancy until their elder years, their senior years, right? That's really a critical matter for our queer and our trans communities. Education, right? Of course, making sure that we are not, that we're banning laws like the Don't Say Gay law, making sure that educators and children are able to get the education they need. Those are things that I think about. Jobs, right? When I think about job protection, making sure that we are boosting a living wage, right? Oftentimes, queer and trans kids, particularly trans youth, Black and brown trans youth, who are not finding the affirming care that they need from their birth families, who are being kicked out, right? And they're taking on jobs and they're being thrust into positions, right? Where they are more likely to encounter poverty, jobs for desperation, including sex work, thinking about sex works, decriminalization, things of that nature, which are going to really impact them more, right? Those are all things that we need to attack this from. So that was a really good question. I gave a really good answer, but it's something that is so deep, right, that we can't just think about it from just one vantage point. Like, we really need to be thinking about holistically how we're serving this community.
Right. Yes. And thank you so much. Thank you so much for that, because it's extremely important. Like I said, I was one of them that was extremely ignorant. I didn't know. I just didn't know the harm that they were facing every single day. And so,
and people thank you. Honestly, and people are going to hear some things that I say and they're going to be like, oh, she mentioned sex work, but just like didn't have enough time to dive into that. But those are things that we should be educating ourselves on, right? And really understanding the ways in which it impacts, right, women, femmes, and particularly trans women.
Yeah. And because did I hear right that in Florida, they woke up one day and they didn't have no insurance? Is there the trans? Yeah, I heard that. Yeah, they did. DeSantis, I heard DeSantis took the insurance. Yeah. I hope that I'm wrong. I hope that I heard wrong. I really do.
I mean, you hope but it's so heinous what's been happening, right? So, it's not out of the realm of what's possible, because we see the attacks coming, particularly in Florida.
Yeah.
And don't get me wrong, Pennsylvania too.
Yeah. And you know what, Summer, is so, I mean, this is just one of the reasons that, why we stress so hard the importance of voting. A lot of our people just feel that beat down, and that was the mission, that for us to feel beat down, that the mission was for us to feel that our votes don't matter. The mission was for us to, not care about going to vote or who's running or anything. So I really, really thank you for that answer, because it aligns with exactly what we talk about every day. So thank you so much for that. My next question is, you had stated that, you always get the one particular question about crossing the aisle. What is something that you always want to tell somebody, or you will hope that somebody asked you and nobody never asked you? Is there something like a question that you wish would be asked that just has not been asked as of yet?
Oh my goodness. That is the question that I've never been asked. That is the question that I've never been asked. And honestly, I bet there are so many, right? I think there are so many different things that, we do that we can and cannot do. I guess sometimes I hope that, through this movement, that's kind of, I would say, electoral movement, that people are asking us what we can and what are the limitations of our roles, right? We think a lot about the power, but we don't think about the limitations. And if there is a limitation in one space, figuring out where the power is, whether it be, because sometimes it may be a limitation at the state level, but it's not at the county level, right? Sometimes, is that a thing that you can do? at the state level or at the congressional level, and it may be no, but it may be, well, you know what, that's actually something that your full board can do, or you know what, actually, that's something that you as a citizen can do. There's a power that's vested in you, or maybe, that's something that, this institution can do. So really just, I guess, asking us, where is it that we can be empowered? Where does the power lie to connect to the issues that we have or the basic needs that we have? I think that's a big one.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. It is. It's very huge.
That's a real big question, because I'm like, dang, there's a whole bunch of questions. I'm asking, in the reality, I'm asking me questions, right? Every day in politics, I learn something. And I think the real, I think of a question. I would say, what is the thing that you want to look for? Like, what qualities should you be looking for? Should we be looking for in our elected leaders and our candidates? And I think that is a really important question, because I think that I have a different answer than I think what we have traditionally kind of been convinced are the qualifications or the qualities that we look up for.
What I was great to say, well, don't tell it, because my next question was exactly, why should someone vote for Summer Lee for Congress?
Yeah, I mean, I would say a number of reasons. First of all, and I often lead, and a lot of people lead, obviously, with the fact that I would be the first Black woman to ever represent Pennsylvania. And that's impactful, because it represents such a large group of people who have never seen themselves reflected in the electoral process. And with that, right, it's not just that I'm a Black woman, it's the experiences, the perspective that comes with with being a Black woman, with having grown up in the Mon Valley, right, in the shadow of the Still era, right, but not in its glory days, right? Having grown up in a community and going through my public school system, right? Having those firsthand knowledge. So I would say the number one reason why I would hope people consider me is because of my experience and my perspective, right? It is different. And the reality is that our government is not supposed to be a monolith. We do need people who are seeing things from a different vantage point. We do need people who have a different perspective. And the reality is that there's a particular perspective that is a dime a dozen. In Congress, especially, right? There's a particular population of folks who are overrepresented. And because of that, right, we are shortchanging our government. We're shortchanging our communities. And we're not really, I would say, we are not reaching our capacity and our real true ability, because we are missing so much perspective that comes from the rich diversity of our constituents, of our population. So there's that reason. I would say that I have legislative and personal experience, right? So don't get me wrong. It's not just that I have lived experience. I have professional experience, whether it be through my law degree or through my 4 years of legislating, through my organizing. So recognizing the power of expanding the electorate and bringing new people in. I would say another reason would be because of how, honestly, I would say it's because of my ability to change, right? To grow, to learn. There are a lot of people who will come in and they're the smartest person in the room, or at least they think they are. And I don't think that that's what we need in government. I don't think we need a room full of people who believe they're the smartest person. I think rather we need people who recognize that we need to be surrounded by people who have every bit of smarts that we need in all vantage points, right? You can't be an expert at everything. But the thing that you should be very good at is accepting when you've made a mistake, right? Being able to really analyze that, reflect on it, to apologize, and to make a remedy for the mistake you made. But then also being committed and humble enough to put in systems so that you don't make the same mistakes over and over and over again. I think that that's how I approach government, and that's how I hope that people will do with me. And I think that that's why I would hope people would invest in really giving the opportunity to represent them.
Yeah. Wow. Thank you so much for that. And so, I got like 2 more questions. And the next one is, I know at the bottom of the ticker, we got every way that you can reach out to Summer. But what if somebody wanted to ask you questions that maybe I didn't touch on, or have you elaborate even more? Which way is the best way to get in touch with you, or even if they wanted to donate to you?
So depending on the type of question you have, I'm gonna try to direct you in the right way. If it's a campaign related question, I want to invite you to reach out to our team. We have an excellent team, right? Run by Abby Gardner, my field, which is run by Casey McGill, Casey the Great. And those folks can be reached on those, what you're seeing on the ticker, our Twitter page,
Mm-hmm.
our Facebook page, but I would say mostly email, right? So info@summerforpa.com. It's SUMMERFORPA.com. So just info at. If you're somebody who wants to donate, I invite you to please go to summerforpa.com, SUMMERFORPA.com. You can't miss the donate link because it's such an integral part of campaigning,
Yeah.
right? Is
Yes.
raising those funds. But those funds go to organizing. It goes directly into expanding the electorate, into reaching folks,
Mm-hmm.
and into communities that have not seen, people who represent them and who are willing to fight for them. Add that to the reason why you should vote for me, because I'm a fighter and I'm going to continue to fight. I'm going to continue to lift up and center the most marginalized, which I believe lifts the high tide, lifts all boats. So Facebook, Twitter, what you see, email, you see, the website, you see, and then also we have a pretty public calendar, right? So you can check our mobilize, which means that we are doing events in communities all throughout this district, from the West End to Westmoreland, from the Mon Valley up to the north side. So please connect with us as we are doing events. We would love to see you. We would love to help you to reach into your networks too, because it's going to take every single one of us to expand the electorate and to really turn out the voters so that we're winning up and down the ballot in November.
Yeah. And another reason, I learned something again today. Every time we do these educational, the community educational civic series, I learned something. I did not know that you have Westmoreland. I did not know that.
Yeah.
I did not know
so
that.
every 10 years, every 10 years we do a redistricting. And listen, folks, when we do the redistricting always comes right after a census. So that's why it's so important, because in this last census, millions of Americans were not captured, and they were predominantly Black and brown. And when we are not capturing Black and brown citizens, that means that we're not getting all the resources that are owed and due our communities. So when we are allocating funds, those are allocated sometimes through the census, right? How big your population is. When we are figuring out how big our districts or how small our districts are going to be, right? So Pittsburgh is a perfect example. We were worried that Pittsburgh would fall beneath 300,000 people. We did not. But the reality is that depending on if we all did the census or not, we could have been higher than 300,000 or quite less than. And that determines whether or not we have one congressional rep or two. It determines on how, liberal or conservative our districts are going to be. It determines on whether or not you're going to be able to get a rep that looks like you. Because if we have large populations of, say, Latinos, right, or large populations of Black and brown folks, large populations of working class folks in like the Mon Valley, for instance, making sure that they are properly represented is a part of the redistricting process. This redistricting process, our districts had to get bigger because Pennsylvania lost a seat because we lost population. So we had to consolidate, and that's how some parts of Westmoreland got in. But we lost Wilkinsburg, Penn Hills. Some of those eastern suburbs have now gone over into a different district. So it was a little give and take.
And I'm so glad you brought up this. Say it again. I'm sorry.
I said, find your district. Make sure that you know who you're voting for. If you're in the West, if you're in the city of Pittsburgh, you're in mine. But if you're in the North Hills, you're in the 17th.
Yeah, I'm so glad you brought that up, because, and I strongly believe that, like right now, we should be talking about knocking on the doors. This is what the census means. Make sure that in 10 years, you know what I'm saying, and not right when it's time for census. I think that is that's a conversation that should be for the next
myths. Yes, we have now 8 years to dispel myths. Right? There are so many, myths and falsehoods that particularly attack the Black and brown community. And some of them aren't myths. Some of them are very legitimate fears. Like, for instance, for our immigrant population, folks who are from immigrant communities and families and households, we want you counted. We need you counted. But there was a very real fear that if some of those households and families filled out the census, they were not sure, particularly because of the information coming down from the White House at the time, which was a different administration. There was the fear that they may be deported for filling out their census, right? That they may lose their livelihood. So that was a very real fear. And that fear is used to keep Black and brown folks particularly from being counted, so that we are not getting our full representation and our full resources.
Yeah. Thank you so much for that. Because yeah, when we was knocking doors, that's exactly what we were hearing. We were hearing the fear, and so thank you so much for that, for bringing that up and educating us on that, the importance of the census. And so before we wrap this up, is there anything that you would like to say before we go? There, you have a lot of people that have thanked you. My nephew Michael Bernarding thanked you. When is the next Civic series? It will be coming up, Miss Mary. Thank you, Summer. Thank you for the question. Thank you for detailing all the issues impacting the TLGBTQ. Let me see. You have a whole bunch. You have a whole bunch of people that are thanking you for your answers, thanking you for coming, thanking you for educating us, and thanking you for stepping up and stepping out for all of us. And so, before we wrap it up, wait a minute. Somebody said communities in Westmoreland County ? What communities in Westmoreland County? I think that's the question.
Ooh, that's going to be a really hard question. I'm not going to hit them all because similar to Allegheny County, where we have a million boroughs and townships, Westmoreland is not vastly different. So I'm going to invite people to check our website where we might have a more detailed community list and map, summerforpas.com. But in the interim, we have communities such as Murraysville, Irwin, North Huntington. We go as far east as Jeanette. So Jeanette is in the district. We don't go as far down as into the Mon Valley part of Westmoreland County. So, for instance, we don't have, like the Nora and communities like that, but we do have a nice swath. It's not too large though. It's only about 15 or so percent of the 12th congressional district, but it does go from Murraysville all the way over to Jeanette.
Okay, and thank you for
And
that.
we don't have Greensburg. So we don't have Greensburg. So
Okay,
I can tell you some
okay.
of the ones that we don't have easier than the ones that we do have.
And so, Miss Michelle Clark, please visit her website and see if you can get the some more, and see how many more communities are involved with Westmoreland County. And so, Summer, before we wrap it up, is there anything that you would like to say before we say goodnight?
Yes, I would like to say thank you. You know how much I love this series and how important it is that we're reaching. This is
Yeah.
part of the work of expanding the electorate. I want to say, everybody, keep your eyes open, your ears open as we're going through the election cycle. A lot of information will be coming. All information and good information, as we saw from our primary. But I want to just say that this is the time right now that we are going to need. These are important races, right? From the governor's race to the Senate race, from the congressional to the state house races, right? There are so many important races. So find out which community you live in and who represents your communities. Tell a neighbor, tell a friend. The most impactful work that you can do really is we love door knocking. We hope that we invite you to come. If you care about this campaign, this election, we invite you to come. But some of the most impactful work you can do is actually in your own network. So whether you're contacting or sending a text message to your family, your loved ones, your kids, your neighbors, your co-workers, if you're talking to that person who you always see on the bus, on the PAT bus, those are
Mm-hmm.
people who, if you touch them, they'll come out and vote. So make sure that you're sharing it. The election date is November 8th. The reality is that most people don't know when the election is. And if you don't have
Mm-hmm.
competitive races in your district, how would you know? So taking that
Mm-hmm.
moment to not assume, but to share goes such a long way. So make sure that you're sharing it with somebody, share what you learn every time you learn something with somebody else. And that's how we are going to grow as voters. That's how we're going to grow as a movement. As we're going through this until November and beyond.
So there we have it, ladies and gentlemen. State Rep Summer Lee, a candidate for Congress PA12. So yes, thank you everyone for watching. Thank you, Summer. As always, love you to death. Thank you so much. And ladies and gentlemen, that is a wrap. And thank you for joining us.